In the famous hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, there are three whom Allah will not look upon on the day of judgment. The first of these is Utullin Mustakbir, that is to say, the one who is arrogant and overweening, so proud that he is incapable of seeing the hearts and the souls of others. And this is a condition that many people fall into. Tragically, the heart hardens and we're incapable of grasping the fact of the softness of the hearts of others. But he goes on, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to list the second. Mannanin bi atiyatih. Somebody who, when he gives things, is kind of patronizing. He hands out money to somebody in the street and then gives him a self-righteous lesson. He hands out money to children or to whoever else it might be, in order not so much to help that person objectively, but in order to feel good about himself. Very often people do this. Very often we do this. Very often there is in our charity and our giving something for ourselves as well as for the other. And this is the second of the categories the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions. And the third of them is munfiqu sal'atihi biyamine, the one who buys and sells his goods by swearing an oath. And the first of these two are easy to understand. The arrogant person, Allah will not look upon him. The person who is insincere and egotistic in giving charity, Allah will not look upon him. The third one seems more problematic, the one who buys and sells by swearing an oath. What I want to talk about in this khutbah is roughly what we would nowadays describe as business ethics. Capital Islam, something like adabul kasb, the courtesies, the proprieties of acquisition, earning a living. Business ethics might sound like something for business people, but in fact we all buy and sell every day. Whether we do it online or over the phone, or with other people, or we lend, or we buy, or whatever it might be, we are always in the state of engaging in transactions using money. And the prophetic hadith, the guidance from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has a good deal to say about this. In fact, we know that Islam, which is not just about our akhirah, but is about our dunya as well, is immensely concerned to ensure that we have good and compassionate ethical boundaries in everything that we do, including things that might seem to be mundane. And we are told in the hadith, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ آفَةٌ وَآفَةُ التِّجَارَةِ الْكَذِبُ. Everything has its own particular weakness or drawback or fault. And the fault of trade is telling lies. We can all think of examples of that. And one of the first cases in which this can overwhelm us is when we're selling something and we tend to praise it extravagantly. We put something on eBay, maybe it's our rubbishy old laptop, and we're putting in the blurb and explaining what a wonderful laptop this is. I've never had any trouble with it. I've never had to deal with a virus. It's incredibly fast. It's got the latest processor, etc., etc. We might be telling the truth, but we're exaggerating and making it sound like something that in fact it isn't. It's just a rubbishy old laptop. And the practice of the Salaf was to oppose this. Even if you're telling the truth, to exaggerate in this way without breaking the bounds of truth is regarded as being inappropriate and unethical. Nowadays, of course, we're all drowning in it because of the advertising industry. $450 billion a year now, and counting, spent globally just on usually competitive advertising. A quarter of the rubbish that ends up in our landfill sites that poisons the earth for generations to come is actually just rubbishy packaging and competitive advertising, fancy bottles and cans that are really unnecessary. Pepsi-Cola spends $250 million rebranding their product, and their sales go up, and so the next year Coca-Cola have to do the same. They spend $250 million until they're back where they started. And the product hasn't changed at all, but it's the consumer that pays. Fundamental part of the modern economy, and it seems to be basically parasitic, competitive, and a zero-sum game. And this praising of one's product, which seems to have gone completely mad, so that every day we get junk mail, every day we get junk emails, every day when we open a newspaper, all kinds of rubbish that we never read falls out of it. Huge supplements an inch thick in the New York Times are just advertising. Goes on and on. It's precisely this thana, this praise for people's product, which is reprehensible in the Sunnah of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The word the Salaf was quite different. There are many stories about somebody called Yunus bin Ubayd, one of the early Muslims. And he had a little shop in Iraq more than 1,000 years ago. And he was quite successful in his business. It was a good shop. It had valuable things, silk things, robes, and so forth. But he used his shop, his little hanot, as his place of ibadah. He prayed in the mosque, but his great personal transformation was the ethical life that he lived in this shop, making sure that all of his transactions were squeaky clean. وروي أن يونس بن عبيد كان خزازا. He was a seller of silk, a prestigious profession. فطلب منه بيع الخز, and he was once asked if he could sell a piece of silk. فأخرجه غلامه, and so the boy who was helping him in the shop brought it out. وقال اللهم ارزقنا الجنة. When he saw this beautiful silk, the boy said, "Oh Allah, bring us to Jannah, bring us to paradise," because silk is something paradisal. When he heard that, Yunus bin Ubayd قال رده, put it back. وما باعه, and he didn't sell it. The reason for this was his wara. Hard for us in our environment to imagine, but he was afraid that that single word, that single phrase would have created an atmosphere which would have inclined somebody to buy that, even though the thing was only what it was. The mention of paradise would have been a kind of advertising, using our language. And that was his wara. He was not willing to take money for something that might be sold even with a tiny amount of deception. But that's the easy part. The difficult part for most of us is when we sell something, not to lie about it and not to conceal its faults. That we have to engage in izharul uyub, to manifest the faults of what we're selling. Khafiyyaha wa jaliyyaha, the hidden faults and the manifest faults. So when you take the picture of the laptop to put on eBay, you make sure you don't take it from an angle which makes it impossible to see that it's only got one USB port and it's kind of bruised and not really very attractive. You show it as it is. This is fundamental to the adab and to the akhlaq of the prophetic way. And it's also in the hadith. Now, famous hadith in Muslim, مر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم برجل يبيع الطعام فأعجبه فأدخل يده فيه فرأى بللا فقال ما هذا؟ قال أصابته السماء. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حبذا جعلته فوق الطعام حتى يرى الناس من غشنا فليس منا. This sound hadith. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was walking and he passed somebody who was on the street selling food, presumably grain of some kind. And he admired it and he put his hand inside it and he found that underneath it was damp. And he said, "What's this?" And the man said, "Oh, it was raining." And so he said, "It would have been better if you put that on top so that people could see. Whoever cheats us is not one of us." That's a famous hadith. "Man ghashana falaysa minna." Whoever cheats us is not one of us. Because if you're part of a community, the basic rule, the most fundamental rule of being in a community is that people trust you. You don't cheat people. You don't cheat your neighbours. You don't cheat your family. You don't cheat other people in the city. You don't cheat. You don't fiddle your taxes, whatever it might be. "Man ghashana falaysa minna." Whoever cheats us is not one of us. There are other hadith as well. بايع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جريرا على الإسلام. Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم took the bay'ah, the pledge of allegiance of Jarir, and he entered Islam. This is Jarir bin Abdullah al-Bajali, one of the famous Sahaba. فذهب لينصرف, and Jarir went to leave. فرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جذب ثوبه, he grabbed him by his kind of garment, his shirt, and brought him back. واشترط عليه النصح لكل مسلم. And he made it a condition upon him that he would give good advice to every Muslim. This was his particular spiritual gift to Jarir as he took his shahada and entered Islam. فكان جرير إذا قام على سلعته whenever Jarir was standing over the things that he was selling, كان يبصر الناس بعيوبها. He would tell people about everything that was wrong with them. People would go into his shop, and all they'd hear from him was what was wrong with all of the stuff that was in his shop. And he'd say, إن شئت أخذت إن شئت تركت. And he would say, if you want, take it. If you want, leave it. Again, unimaginable. فقيل له في ذلك لو دمت على هذا لا ينفض بيعك أبدا. If you keep doing this, people said to him, you'll never sell anything. فقال رضي الله عنه بايعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على النصح لكل مسلم. And he said, رضي الله عنه, we took our pledge with Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam that we would give good counsel to every Muslim. That's difficult, unattainable for us. These are kind of ideals. We do our best. But we know it's an important principle that we don't lie about stuff that we're selling. If we're selling our house, we do tell the agent and whoever wants to buy it that there's dry rot, or that it needs underpinning, or all of the other problems that it might have. It is haram to conceal those things. How do we reach that degree? Well, the ulama say that it helps if we remember that in every transaction, including apparently mundane ones, there has to be barakah. There has to be a blessing. And the Prophet ﷺ says this, Al-bay'an إِذَا صَدَقَا وَنَصَحَا بُورِكَ لَهُمَا فِي بَيْعِهِمَا. That the sellers, if they tell the truth and give good advice, they will have a blessing in their sale. وَإِذَا كَذَبَا وَكَتَمَا نُزِعَتْ بَرَكَةُ بَيْعِهِمَا. If they tell lies and they conceal things, then the barakah, the blessing of that sale, will be taken away from them. That's the first thing. We're not just in it for the money, but we want a blessing. And maybe that blessing will bring us other rizq in the dunya, as it happened for Yunus bin Ubayd, incredibly fussy in his shop, still very successful. And Allah, يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ, He provides for whomever He wills. And the other thing that the ulama suggest is that we remember the real tijara, the real deal, the real trade which is in the akhirah. And the hadith says, لا تزال لا إله إلا الله تدفع عن الناس سخط الله, that La ilaha illallah will continue to protect people from Allah's anger, ما لم يؤثروا صفقة الدنيا على الآخرة, for as long as they don't prefer the trading which is in this world to the trading which is for the sake of the next. We make sacrifices in this world for the sake of the reward in the next. That's the real tijara, lan tabur, which never goes away. So remember those two things when you buy and sell, and you don't want to fall prey to the temptation of hiding things. First of all, look the barakah in the action, and secondly, remember the real deal, the real trade, which is for your akhirah, which is for your eternity. There are other aspects to this as well, other things that we need to think about, such as, for instance, the beautiful adab that the Sharia has imposed regarding different types of buying and selling, and you can find out the different sorts of lawful transactions in the books of fiqh. For instance, the Holy Prophet ﷺ used to forbid certain types of transaction. Naha an talaqi al-rikban, for instance. This is in a hadith, and it's there in the books of fiqh. What it means is that you not sell at a high price by exploiting the ignorance of the true price of somebody who's strange to your city. So somebody comes in from the desert, he hasn't been to the town for 5 years or so, he only comes in to buy a sack of salt, and then he disappears. That's all he needs. And he doesn't know what the prices are or what he should be paying. And if you sell to him at a high price that the local people wouldn't pay, that's regarded as this rikban. And the ulama say it's a valid contract. If you sell like that, it does belong to the buyer and it no longer belongs to you. But the khiyar, this is a fiqh term, that the right to change your mind remains with the seller. Even if it's left the market, it's left the town, he can come back and say, you swindled me because you sold me, say, I'm a Japanese tourist in London, and this guy on the street corner on Oxford Street sells me a t-shirt for £40. Any Londoner might pay £5-6 for it. In Sharia, the tourist can come back and demand his money back. And one of the tasks of the muhtasib, the market inspector, one of the responsibilities of the qadi is to ensure that if people want to have their money back in that situation, then that's exactly what they're entitled to. And other things, najash, for instance, another type of sharp practice, which is specifically ruled out in the hadith. And what this means is, for instance, if I'm in my antique shop, say, somewhere in Cambridge, and somebody comes in and says, that's a nice table, I'll give you £1,000 for it. You can see they really want that table. Najash is when you make a phone call and you get your brother, your wife, your friend to come in and accidentally on purpose take an interest in that same thing and say, I'll pay 1,500 for it, in order to push up the price. So you begin a kind of auction. So the guy ends up paying much more than he would have done. And again, it's a legitimate transaction in Sharia, but it is regarded as something that you can go back on. For most of the ulama, that kind of transaction, it can be revoked even once you've left the shop, because it's regarded as a form of cheating. And often auctions are like this. Often on eBay, for instance, or a big art auction. Sometimes the prices are pushed up by the fact that the seller of the work of art is himself on the phone making the next bid in order to push the price up. The work of art, some piece of junk perhaps, from a modern sculptor, going to 10 million, and the guy wants more. So he makes a phone call, or gets his agent to place a phone call to bid 15, because his judgment is that will trigger the market, it will move further. And so somebody bids 20 and so on. And that's precisely what the Holy Prophet ﷺ is forbidding here. That in this auction situation, very often there can be all kinds of shop practice. And even in the property market in this country, when you buy a house and the agent says to you, we've had another very good offer, you can never be exactly sure what that means. You don't know if he really has had an offer, or if one of his friends has jokingly said, all right, you can count me in and see if that pushes the price up. You don't really know what's happening. And this kind of murky nature to a transaction is one of the things that the Sharia seeks to forbid. There are other aspects of this as well, which are not just to do with what's lawful and unlawful, the halal and the haram, when we buy and sell things, but are to do with the kind of ihsan, excellence, the good courtesies involved in these transactions. And one of them is a principle called ghaban. Ghaban means selling at a very high price. If I buy something for £1 and then half an hour later sell it for £10, as long as I haven't misrepresented it, it still belongs to me. That is not in itself a sin. However, if I decide to lower the price a little bit, just so as not to be unjust to the person who's buying it from me, I feel that it's a little bit outrageous that I make such a huge profit in such a short period of time. That is considered to be a good deed. That is considered to be ihsan. It works the other way as well. For instance, if you see somebody who's poor, and they come into your shop and they say, here's my old, whatever it might be, my old water heater, and I need to sell it because I have to pay my bills, and please give me £1,000 for my old water heater. And you know that the thing is a piece of junk and worth maybe a few hundred. If you give him the 1,000, that is considered to be hasana, that is considered to be a good deed. You're not colluding in some kind of extravagance or exploitation. That is your way, as it were, of, in an honourable way, without humiliating the person, helping him out. It's a kind of sadaqah by other means. That is regarded as something that is a good practice. And very often, in traditional context, in bazaars, for instance, in markets where prices are often not fixed, one of the positive aspects of a system of haggling is that generally the shop owner will have a good idea of what people can pay. And people who he knows to be poor are likely to end up paying less than people who can pay a much higher price. So this is another aspect of the prophetic adab. Another dimension is when you owe money, to pay it back on the nose immediately. That the Holy Prophet says that خِيَارُكُمْ أَحْسَنُكُمْ قَضَاءً. The best of you are those who repay the best, which means that you have to repay the loan on a particular day, and you don't think, maybe he's busy, maybe he'll call me next week, maybe I can get away with another delay. You are the one who goes to him, and you put the money down on his desk, and that is the ihsan. And that is the prophetic way, if you can pay it. So this is also to do with the hadith. رَحِمَ اللَّهُ إِمْرُؤًا سَهْلَ الْبَيْعِ وَسَهْلَ الشِّرَاءِ وَسَهْلَ الْقَضَاءِ وَسَهْلُ الْإِقْتِضَاءِ. Another beautiful hadith. May Allah have mercy upon the person who is easy when he sells things, and easy when he buys things, and is easy when he's repaying things. He does it on the button, he doesn't complain, he doesn't come up with excuses, he's got the money, he repays. And it's also easy, and this is the final point, it's easy in reclaiming a debt. This is another of the fada'il. It's your haqq, your right to be repaid on the date that you agree. The obligation on the other person to do that. But the Quran says, وَإِن كَانَ ذَا عُسْرَةٍ فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ. If he's experiencing difficulty, then give him a respite until a time when it is easy. And the hadith says, مَنْ أَنْظَرَ مُعْسِرًا, whoever gives somebody who is finding it difficult to repay a debt, حَاسَبَهُ اللَّهُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. Whoever gives somebody a respite when they have to repay a debt, Allah will give them an easy reckoning. And there's many other hadith like this. One of the great fada'il is not only to repay a debt on time, but if somebody can't repay money that they owe you on time, it's a great fazilat, a great merit, just to give them extra time and ideally, if you can, to let them off altogether. Which takes us to another point that the ulama mention when they talk about these adab al-kasb, which is that it is a praiseworthy thing if somebody comes into your shop, for instance, or somebody buys a book off you, and they're really needy people, and they really need that. They need the food, or they need the book for their studies, and they say, okay, I'm not going to just take it as sadaqah, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back next year. It's legitimate to have the intention but never actually ask for it back. And Yunus bin Ubayd, again, remember the pious silk seller, used to keep 2 books, ledgers in his shop. One for the people who he knew could pay back and should pay back, and the other for people who he really didn't want to receive money from again, but just considered it to be a sadaqah, one of his hasanat. The final aspect is, of course, that when we buy and sell, we have to buy and sell exactly in due measure. Surah Al-Tatfif, it begins with that. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Woe betide those who give short measure. الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. Those who, when they get something by trade from somebody else, make sure they get the whole amount. They pay for a pound of butter and they make sure that it is a pound. But when they are selling it to others, maybe it's not quite a pound, maybe it's an ounce or 2 less. Woe betide them. This is something that happens not just in measurable things, but also in terms of, for instance, fabric, or in terms of selling petrol. Make sure you give them a little bit extra. Or anything else that you might be buying and selling, make sure there's a little bit extra. And there's a hadith in Tirmidhi that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لَمَّا اشْتَرَى شَيْئًا قَالَ لِلْوَزَانِ زِنْ وَأَرْجِحْ. When Allah's Messenger bought something, he would say to the guy in the shop who had the scales, weigh it and make sure that the balance tips on your side. And if you're the one on the other side, you're the one who's selling, make sure it tips on the side of the customer. And that's taqwa. And this is the Quranic prohibition on tatfif. And again, people don't use scales so much, but in many parts of the world they do. And this is something that is a life and death daily issue for many people as they go to the market. And this is one of the areas that the Sharia takes seriously. That even the place where you seem to be just earning for your dunya is also a place where you're earning for your akhirah. It's a place where you have to maintain these very high akhlaq. It's a place where Allah is constantly testing you, where you're constantly under the muhasabah, the reckoning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is counting it all up, however lax your own accountancy practices may be. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our dealings with each other and with others, give us good akhlaq, to remember the boundaries of the Sharia, to learn the fiqh of the Sharia in buying and selling, and to distinguish between lawful and unlawful transactions, lawful and unlawful loans and gifts, and also that He give us ihsan, that He gives us generosity, that He gives us good nature, and the willingness and the determination that in each transaction our intention is to help the other person rather than simply to amass things for ourselves in this dunya. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.